Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
I'm Mathieu alongside Kailey Leinz in Washington with a special edition of the Balance of Power podcast. Today, a conversation with Maryland Governor Wes Moore. We spoke with the Democrat following his appearance with Joe Biden in Philadelphia, part of a series of events aimed at galvanizing support among black voters. We started by asking the governor if he believes in this perceived weakness for the president in his bid for re-election.
I think the energy is real because people have seen results. We know that this is a president who is unafraid to be able to delve into the larger systemic challenges that oftentimes have continued to impact and hurt the black community. So when we're seeing now that coming to the end of his first term, that we now have historically low unemployment rates amongst African Americans, that we're watching an increase in black-owned businesses started by black men that are the highest we've seen in 30 years, that we have a president that's focusing on work and wages and wealth for all members of our society and all parts of our community. I think the results are showing, and I do think that whatever polls people are seeing 6 months before an election, the energy that we're seeing on the ground for the president, that is more real than frankly the poll numbers might indicate.
Okay, Governor, so you may not believe the poll numbers, although it is happening consistently across any number of polls. There are black voters out there who are telling pollsters they are feeling less likely to vote for Biden this time around than they were in 2020. Can you just help us with a potential diagnosis as to why for some, even if not as many as polls may suggest in your mind, why some may not feel that the work of this administration is resonating with them? Is this a messaging problem?
Well, I think there's honestly a larger frustration and cynicism that does exist in the black community, and I don't think that's Joe Biden's making, but I think it is something that the president has got to wrestle with, and we've got to speak to. I'll be honest, I come from I don't come from a political background or even a political family. Mm-hmm. I know there are family members who I still have to convince to get involved. I had family members I had to convince to vote for me simply because they hadn't had a history of voting before. So that cynicism is historical. That cynicism oftentimes is generational. I think what people are seeing, and they'll continue to see as the president goes out and continues to earn every vote, is that what's also real is the fact that we have a measurement of momentum when it comes to economic growth and economic success, that we're now seeing a measure of growth in actually a decrease in the wealth gap that exists within the country. That's real and that's intentional. So I think, does the president have to go out there and earn every vote? Absolutely. Does he have to break through a measure of historical cynicism that oftentimes exists within the African American community during election times? 100%. But I think that's work that the president is willing to put in order to assure a re-election.
The president questioned whether Donald Trump would pardon the January 6 rioters if they had been black. And he said a lot more than that, Governor. He said Donald Trump is a landlord who denies housing applications because of the color of people's skin, the guy who will not say Black Lives Matter, and invokes neo-Nazi Third Reich terms. He said Trump is the same guy who unleashed the birtherism lie against Barack Obama. Is this the rhetoric that's required here? Is this now the Say It Out Loud campaign?
I think about the work that's happening right now, in the state of Maryland, where we're now going on nearly 12 straight months of having one of the lowest unemployment rates in the entire country. That we are now watching the unemployment rate amongst African Americans at historically low levels in our state, that we have now seen economic momentum increase after going 5 straight years of 0.2% GDP growth. We're now finally watching the economic momentum in the state of Maryland that's growing. And the thing I know is that the reason that all this is happening is because we're moving in partnership with the Biden administration. And so I know my pitch to voters, my pitch to folks in Maryland and anywhere else that I'll go to speak about why this election matters is, don't come out and vote because you're afraid of the alternative. We know the alternative. We know the records of both of these two people. But vote because if you can look at what's happened over the past even just year and a half in my state, and that's just one example, imagine if we can get another 4 years. And so I'm not scared of the alternative. I'm hopeful that another 4 years with the president will be able to bring the kind of economic growth that all of us will be able to benefit from.
Well, Governor, that's all at the presidential level. There are also down ballot races in the state of Maryland we are watching, including for the Senate. You, of course, backed Angela Alsobrooks in her Democratic primary campaign against Congressman David Trone. She won. She is now up against your predecessor, Larry Hogan, who left the governorship with 77% approval. And sir, you yourself were a pretty popular governor, but that approval is even higher than yours. Can you confidently say there is not a risk that Larry Hogan can be the one that flips a blue Senate seat red?
Well, I think there's absolutely a risk, but I think it's also why we're taking it seriously, because what the real risk is that that the state of Maryland is not going to give the Senate majority to the Republicans, not in this moment. And I also think there's disparity in the differences between these two candidates is also very real, where, you know, we have the county executive, the person I supported very early in this race, and I'm excited to support her through the election, through the general election, where she has a very clear history of being able to fight for reproductive health care and reproductive rights. And we know that the old governor does not. In fact, vetoed legislation to support privacy, vetoed legislation to support additional protections. I had to, on my first day of office, I released $3.5 million of funds that the old governor previously withheld because he did not want to release that money due to political reasons. That we have a candidate in Angela Alsobrooks who, while she was county executive, saw a significant drop in violent crime in Prince George's County versus, you know, the old governor saw significant increases in violence and homicides during his time as governor. So it's going to be an important and spirited race. I think the county executive is going to win because I think these issues that we are going to see, people understand that there's a track record that has to be examined.
You've had some good things to say in the past, Governor, about Larry Hogan. I know you're a gentleman, and that should not be outside of the realm, but you called him a capable leader with a strong record. He's using your words in some of his ads. But I'm also taken by what Larry Hogan said about you. In a conversation with Maryland Matters, I believe it was, shortly after you won the governorship, quote, "I really like him," he said. "Seems like a genuinely nice, likable guy who seems to really want to make a difference and seems to be in it for the right reasons." He said that about you, Governor. Are you sure you guys are on opposite sides?
No, and what I tell people, I don't have a problem, with him personally at all. I also know that my support of Angela Alsobrooks is not because of personality. It's because she matches the values, not just of me, but the values of the state. And I know what's on the line. Okay. I know that having a Republican Senate majority is on the line. I know that making sure that Maryland can be a safe haven for abortion rights is on the line. I know making sure that we can actually provide supports to make our community safer and more affordable is on the line. And so I have nothing bad to say personally about the old governor. I also just know that when I think about who I want as a partner inside the U.S. Senate, it's Angela Alsobrooks.
Well, we know, Governor, that there are also some issues very specific to Maryland that the state is grappling with, including what has kept you occupied for the last 2 months, the aftermath of the collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge. The Maryland Chamber of Commerce just released data yesterday that said 64% of small businesses in and around Baltimore County said they lost revenue due to the collapse. Others talked about increased freight costs, logistical challenges because of the way that things need to be rerouted. When can you confidently tell those businesses, these individuals affected, that things will be back to normal?
Yeah, I can't overstate not just the importance of the Port of Baltimore, not just to the region and to Baltimore and to Maryland, but to the entire country. 2/3 of this country gets their goods from the Port of Baltimore. But what we saw just 8 weeks ago when we had a ship that was the size of 3 football fields, sitting and caught in the middle of the Patapsco River with 4,000 tons of steel sitting on top of it and the remainder of the Key Bridge at the bottom of the river, with 6 people unaccounted for. This was a tragedy that we had not seen in our state in generations. And I'm so proud of the way that this state has mobilized and the speed. In addition to being able to return all of the remains to the individuals, to the families who lost people, we are now days away from being able to have the full federal channel, 700 feet by 50-foot depth, reopened. And to be able to have the Port of Baltimore coming back again. We saw during the month of April where there was a real concern about where unemployment rate for the state of Maryland was going to go for the month of April. And we're proud that because we were able to work with the private sector, work with our partners and all of our port partners, that not only for the month of April has Maryland continued to have amongst the lowest unemployment rates in the entire country, we actually gained thousands of jobs during that same time period and watched labor participation actually increase during the month of April. So I could not be more proud of the response of this state. We've got a long road to go, and I will not stop until we have a new bridge, a new Francis Scott Key Bridge built and overlooking the skyline of Baltimore. But the speed of this recovery really has been a marvel, and it's really been because we've had a coordinated effort in getting it done.
Well, you do have a lot to be proud of, Governor, and the heroic actions of the public safety officials in Baltimore and the state of Maryland, including the divers who have been risking their lives to comb the bottom of the floor of the port. Remarkable stories to tell. But then it becomes a question about money, and we've talked about this before on Bloomberg. In fact, we had a conversation earlier with Republican Congressman Patrick McHenry, chairs the House Financial Services Committee, and we asked him directly about the chances for a supplemental budget to rebuild the bridge passing this Congress. And he talked about offsets that would be needed, other budget cuts, suggesting that we're spending too much. What are you hearing from leaders in the House about that, making that happen to rebuild the bridge?
You know, I've been incredibly encouraged by the amount of bipartisan support that we've received. People from not just the Democratic side of the House, but also people from Chair Womack and Chair Cole from Oklahoma and from Arkansas and Oklahoma, respectively. People who have said, we understand the importance of getting this bridge rebuilt because it's a core artery for the Port of Baltimore, which is indispensable to the American economy. And what we're asking for, the 100% cost share, is not saying, oh, the American people are going to pay for it. I'm very confident that the American people will be made whole. When you look at everything from insurance to potential pending litigation, Lloyd's of London has indicated this is going to be the most expensive maritime tragedy in our nation's history. So the American people will be made whole. The reason our ask for the 100% cost share is essentially bridge financing. It's saying that while we're going through the process of a potential litigation, which we know could take years, we've got to get moving. We've got to get building, because my commitment to the people of my state and the people of this country, frankly, is that we are going to build this thing on time and on budget and effectively, and we're going to get the Port of Baltimore going again because it's important to the larger supply chain of our nation. But we've got to get moving. That's the importance of the bipartisan support for the 100% cost share, and we've been incredibly heartened by the amount of by the encouraging words and supports that we've received from members from both sides of the aisle on this issue.
Maryland Governor Wes Moore on a special edition of the Balance of Power podcast. Alongside Kailey Leinz, I'm Mathieu in Washington. This is Bloomberg. Thanks for listening to the Balance of Power podcast. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already at Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can find us live every weekday from Washington, D.C. at noontime Eastern at Bloomberg.com.